A man accidentally falls into a vat of chemical waste, and a searing, burning sensation instantly engulfs his entire body. By the time he struggles to crawl out, his body has already been corroded beyond recognition, and the excruciating pain causes Melvin to writhe on the ground. But instead of helping him, the onlookers only surround Melvin and laugh heartily at the sight. A nearby patrolling police officer sees the gathering crowd and quickly walks over to investigate. Unexpectedly, as soon as the officer touches Melvin's skin, flames instantly engulf his hands. This scene terrifies everyone present, unable to bear the pain any longer. Melvin is forced to flee the scene. At this moment, Melvin's body also begins to burn, leaving a trail of corrosive marks wherever he walks. Returning home, Melvin jumps into the bathtub to try to cool down, but things only get worse. The cold water begins to boil in an instant, his arms continue to swell, and clumps of his once thick hair fall out at the slightest touch. Melvin quickly gets out of the tub and checks the mirror, only to find that his face has become even more grotesque. But the nightmare is far from over. Melvin's entire body starts to mutate, each part swelling at a visibly rapid pace. After a painful struggle, he finally transforms into a towering 2-meter monster. To avoid his mother seeing him like this, Melvin has no choice but to leave home. The first thing he does once he's outside is head back to the gym where he used to work to exact revenge on those who bullied him. The first to suffer is the gym owner who exploited him, completely unaware that danger is closing in as he works out. The Toxic Avenger charges forward and pins him down, then pushes the gym equipment to its limits. To avoid scaring others, the Toxic Avenger thoughtfully covers the gym owner's gruesome state with a mop. Next in line is the woman who is about to enjoy a sauna. Just as Wanda is relaxing, the Toxic Avenger, now wearing a burlap sack, suddenly appears. Wanda thinks it's just her prank-loving boyfriend, but when she pulls the sack off, she is in for a shock. And Wanda's death is particularly brutal. Wanda was pinned down by the Toxic Avenger onto the scorching hot appliance. As it was her actions that led to his monstrous transformation, it turns out that not long ago, Melvin was just a janitor at the gym. Although he was born with a mental deficiency and wasn't handsome, he was diligent and hardworking. But because Melvin had a creepy appearance and always seemed clueless, a group of gym customers constantly bullied him. One day, these people came up with an even more perverse idea. After discussing amongst themselves, they had the fair-skinned and beautiful Julie deliberately approach Melvin, say some flirtatious things, and arrange to meet him alone in a secluded spot. Having never been in a relationship in his 28 years of life, Melvin couldn't resist such temptation. He eagerly followed Julie's instructions, putting on a pink tutu and excitedly heading to the rendezvous. However, when Melvin arrived at the location, he found it pitch dark and could only hear Julie's voice. When the lights suddenly turned on, Melvin realized that the Julie in his arms was actually a sheep. Surrounding him was a large crowd of onlookers, all there to laugh at his expense. Overcome with shame at being humiliated once again, Melvin just wanted to leave as quickly as possible, but the crowd followed him, continuing to mock him relentlessly. Pushed to the brink, Melvin had no choice but to jump out of a window, only to land on a truck filled with chemical waste parked below. Melvin fell right into a barrel of toxic sludge, which is how he ended up in this terrifying state. After taking care of the wretched Wanda, Melvin only wanted to relieve himself by the roadside but accidentally stumbled upon a few thugs harassing a police officer. Even though his appearance had changed, Melvin's kind nature remained intact, so when he saw that they were about to castrate the officer, Melvin appeared just in time, grabbed Cigar Face, and hurled him away. The sudden appearance of the monstrous creature terrified the thugs, making their faces go pale. Melvin then picked up 2 of them as if they were little chicks, effortlessly yanking out their hair with a gentle pull. Still unwilling to back down, Cigar Face tried to fight back, but Melvin taught him a lesson with a flurry of punches. Seeing this, one of his buddies rushed in to help, only to nearly break his own bones with a single punch. Another thug, who knew a bit of rudimentary fighting, was also tossed several yards away by Melvin with a single monkey paw grab. Finally, Melvin used the same move to throw Cigar Face into a trash can as well. Witnessing the brutal methods of this monster, even the officer in the garbage heap was utterly terrified. But Melvin didn't harm the officer. Instead, he returned all the fallen items to him and even kindly helped him up from the ground. Back at the police station, the officer was still shaken. When interviewed by the media, he truthfully recounted his encounter. The story of the monster saving a police officer quickly spread throughout the small town, but Mayor Belgudi was furious about this because those 3 thugs were actually his men. It turns out that the mayor had been secretly using his position to conduct shady, illegal dealings. To ensure that the monster wouldn't disrupt his operations, he decided to covertly arrange for Melvin's capture. Meanwhile, after some hesitation, Melvin decided to go home and face his mother. However, as soon as the door opened, his mother slammed it shut in fear, leaving Melvin feeling somewhat dejected, with nowhere else to go. Melvin wandered to a junkyard filled with chemical waste. He found a small shed, cleaned it up a bit, and temporarily settled in, but not long after, another armed robbery occurred in the town. In broad daylight, several thugs robbed a restaurant. They not only looted the cash register and the customers' money, they also planned to assault the female patrons and the owner's wife. One man, unable to stand by any longer, stepped forward and pleaded with the thugs to let everyone go, offering himself as a hostage. But Leroy responded with a shot, and afterward, shamelessly claimed it was in self-defense. Seeing the fear in everyone's eyes only made the thugs more excited. Frank had his eyes set on a beautiful blind woman named Sarah. Not only did Leroy shoot Sarah's guide dog, but Frank also prepared to assault her right there in the restaurant. At the critical moment, Melvin suddenly appeared in the restaurant. He grabbed Frank and hurled him 100 meters away, and with a swift kick, sent Leroy flying as well. Frank got back up and unleashed a flurry of punches on Melvin, but they had no effect on him. With just a light twist, Melvin dislocated Frank's arm. The terrified bystanders quickly fled the restaurant. Then, Rico, who had been hiding behind the cash register, sprang into action. As the leader of the gang, Rico was indeed smart. While launching his attacks, he skillfully dodged Melvin's blows and even landed a kick directly on Melvin's weak spot. If not for Melvin's enhanced and mutated body, that kick might have decided the fight. Rico knew full well that his 2.5 years of martial arts training were no match for Melvin, so he had no choice but to pull out his trump card, and when that was knocked away, he took a katana from the wall. While Rico might have been a serious threat to an ordinary person, he was no match for the mutated Melvin. In the end, Melvin simply picked Rico up and tossed him into the kitchen. Melvin intended to finish off Rico, but Leroy, who had been playing dead, attempted a sneak attack. However, Leroy was swiftly caught by Melvin, who pinned him down on the table with one hand and ultimately turned him into a strawberry milkshake. Rico's fate was even worse. Melvin firmly secured his hands and dragged him over to the deep fryer. To keep Rico from squirming, Melvin tied him tightly to the fryer with a steel pipe. Amid Rico's desperate pleas, Melvin plunged his hands into the boiling oil, holding them there until Rico completely lost consciousness. Just as Melvin was about to leave, a sudden idea struck him, and he threw Frank into the oven. By the time Melvin left the scene with Sarah, the police arrived, only to find the kitchen in a horrific state. At that moment, Melvin had already taken Sarah back to her home. Curious about what her savior looked like, Sarah asked to feel Melvin's handsome face. Not wanting to scare her, Melvin lied, saying he had a lot of pimples. Sarah then mentioned that she could read palms, so she took hold of Melvin's thick hand. "You're going to have a lot of good things coming to you in the future. You're going to become a very important man." Perhaps because of Sarah's words, Melvin decided to carry out good deeds to the end. He was either fighting criminals or on the way to fight criminals. Thanks to his efforts, the town's crime rate plummeted. But that's not all. Whenever anyone needed help or was in danger, Melvin was there to lend a hand. Whether it was helping an old lady cross the street, opening a jar for a woman who couldn't manage it, or even babysitting, there was nothing he couldn't do. Thus, Melvin transformed from a monster everyone wanted to kill into a hero who protected the town. His handsome face was even printed on t-shirts, and his legend spread through every street and alley. However, the prison was soon overflowing because there were hardly any criminals left in town, thanks to him. But Mayor Belgudi couldn't sit still any longer. If this continued, not only would his business suffer, but even the police officers in town would be out of a job. So, to solve this problem, Belgudi teamed up with Cigarface, who had been beaten by Melvin before, and planned to finish Melvin off once and for all. Cigarface gathered a few goons and surrounded Melvin, armed to the teeth. They were full of arrogance, but Melvin easily thwarted their attack with a single move. In the end, the thugs all perished by their own weapons. A barrel of chemical waste completely changed Melvin's life. He might have gone bald and become ugly, but he also became stronger. After 28 years of being single, Melvin even found love. That's right, Sarah, the woman Melvin saved in the restaurant, fell hopelessly in love with him. Even though Sarah named Melvin had an extraordinary and shocking appearance, she moved in with him at the chemical waste dump. They renovated their love nest together and lived happily ever after. Perhaps because Melvin was too busy falling in love and didn't have time to fight crime, the delinquents in the town began to act up again. These two guys were truly insane. They didn't even spare an 80-year-old woman. Bozo and Slug mercilessly beat the elderly woman with her own cane and then stole her car. But as they were happily driving away, that familiar figure suddenly appeared in front of them. Seeing this, Bozo and Slug immediately slammed on the gas, intending to run Melvin over, but Melvin leaped onto the roof of the car, knowing that falling into the hands of this monster meant certain death. Bozo and Slug wildly swerved the car, trying to shake him off, but Melvin clung to the roof like a tenacious leech. He freed his right hand, strangled Slug to death on the spot, and then opened the door, tossing Slug's body out of the car. Next, Melvin climbed into the passenger seat and began struggling with Bozo for control of the steering wheel. The car careened wildly, causing several accidents, before it finally lost control and plunged down a 100-meter hill. After a loud explosion, the car was engulfed in flames, and Bozo was burned to a crisp, yet Melvin emerged from the wreckage completely unscathed. Afterward, Melvin went to a dry cleaner's and found an elderly woman there. He picked her up without hesitation. The woman desperately pleaded, insisting that she hadn't done anything wrong, but Melvin still shoved her into the washing machine. Once the machine was turned on, it started spinning at high speed, and within moments, the old woman was thoroughly cleaned. Melvin then placed her under the dryer. By the time the dry cleaner's owner returned, the woman had turned into a dry husk. But when Melvin returned to the waste dump, he was filled with guilt. He confessed to Sarah that he had done something terrible today. He had killed an innocent person. He didn't want to do it, but he couldn't control his urge to kill. Fearing that he might one day hurt Sarah, Melvin urged her to leave him, but Sarah refused to go. Sarah came up with an idea. They could move far away from the crowded town to a quiet place where they could live in peace. That way, Melvin might be able to control his urges. So, early the next morning, they packed their bags and left the town. When Belle Goody heard that the monster hero had killed an innocent elderly woman, he decided to use this as an opportunity to openly get rid of Melvin. This time, no one would object, but soon, police chief delivered some bad news. It turned out that the old woman wasn't innocent after all. She was a trafficker who kidnapped women and children. It seemed that Melvin had accidentally eliminated a bad person. However, when interviewed by the media, Belle Goody concealed the truth. Determined to get rid of Melvin, Belle Goody even called in the National Guard. After several days of searching, they finally found Melvin and Sarah at a farm. When the news spread, the townspeople flocked to the scene to witness what would happen. Melvin's tent was completely surrounded, with the National Guard ready and waiting to pull the trigger at any moment. With such overwhelming forces, even the mighty Melvin might not escape death. The townspeople who witnessed this were deeply worried, as they clearly didn't believe that their hero would kill innocents. People whom Melvin had helped in the past began to step forward and plead for mercy, hoping that Belle Goody would show leniency and spare their hero. But despite their heartfelt pleas, Belle Goody remained unmoved. He grabbed a megaphone and shouted at Melvin, ordering him to come out and face death. As Melvin stepped out of the tent, Belle Goody immediately gave the order to attack, but just then, the townspeople rushed forward. Standing in front of Melvin, they tried to use their bodies to block the soldiers from firing. For safety's sake, Melvin urged them to leave quickly. Seeing this, the soldiers began to hesitate. The moved commanding officer lowered his weapon, and the soldiers followed suit, pulling back their guns. But even at this point, Belle Goody was still unwilling to give up. He fired a shot directly at Melvin, but the bullet had no effect on him. As Melvin advanced step by step toward Belle Goody, no one at the scene made any move to stop him, because they all know that Belle Goody is not a good person. Facing death, Belle Goody tried to bribe Melvin, but Melvin responded by ripping out his organs. The town's biggest criminal was executed on the spot, and the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. In the days to come, Melvin would continue to protect the town as the heroic monster.